Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. Today's date is October the 11th in the year of our Lord 223. And from the last broadcast up until now, nothing has really changed as far as where we're stuck at in this political one-sidedness, where you have a party that is ready to govern, um, willing to reach across the aisle to look for compromise for anything involving what's good for America and the American people. And, because it takes two to tango, it's not working because our Republican colleagues on the right are still governing from a position of confusion, um, governing from a position of scatterbrainness, for lack of a better word. They can't seem to get it together. But while the Republican Party is fractured, falling apart, can't seem to get in control of the majority that they have in the House, the world goes on. You know, um, the Middle East conflict will not stop because the Republican Party, in America can't get it together in order to create legislation or propose legislation, bills, that may aid Israel, may aid Palestine. They don't even have a House Speaker in place. And, regrettably, this is where we're at. And so, where can we turn other than the voting booth? Where else should we turn as a way out of this? So, Democrats, we still have a country to save. We still have a country to save it until this rogue right party can get back on track to a time where even when we didn't agree with conservatism, we trusted that they would wholeheartedly try their best to lead the country down the right path, whether it was under compassionate conservatism, trickle down economics, or what have you. They had leaders in place that we could trust that would not, threaten the very existence of the democracy that we dwell under, that we thrive under. And so, here we are, looking at current state of being on things. Things are looking good. The latest jobs report that came out for the job numbers in September, that came out last week here, some point in time in the first of the month of October, it is looking good. It was beyond expectations by all accounts. So, Bidenomics is, while it may not be agreeable to all, it seems to be putting the American people to work. We have a strong job market, low unemployment or unemployment holding steady. And, with that being said, from low to holding steady, the president knows that there's always work to do. There's no time to, rest on your laurels here. And, thank God we have a common sense Democrat president in office who realizes that, it. But, by all accounts, the numbers. And, when these things come out, like something like the jobs report, it's not a Republican report or a Democratic report. These reports are apolitical. They're the numbers don't reflect party values, if you will. They're biased as to political leanings. So, not being a Republican job report or a Democrat job report, but the American job report that has come out, has indicated by all means that, Bidenomics is doing better than worse. And there are jobs out there to be had left and right. Now, as I said, the Middle East is raging right now, and we're without a speaker. Regrettably, this is embarrassing. This is something that's unconscionable for us to be going through something like this, at any point in time. But nevertheless, when we have a crisis going on in the Middle East, and Republicans have to realize this, that the world doesn't stop just because the Republican Party can't get its act together. There's mutiny on the bounty here. But life goes on. And so as Democratic voters, I mean, how much? How much is enough? When will we say enough already as voters? Because this can only happen. And I want that 90-something percentile that of African American plus that vote leaning Democratic to hear this. This can only happen if your numbers go down. And so, you're the last line of defense, basically. A 90-something plus percentile of Negro voters in America with Democrat leanings. Now, there's going to always be the argument, on the right and or the left, or just in general. And so we stated here unequivocally here at Soluble that we don't expect party affiliation to solve, everyday problems that exist, amongst Negroes in America, whether it be poverty, illiteracy, in housing, or what have you, whatever the problems are. We're not here to say that, the Democrats are our sole savior. But when we get involved, we could see by comparison, by contrast, that we have seats at the table, more seats at the table, and not just only a seat where you're sitting there as say like a seat filler. You also have a voice within this party. And so, going forward in America, we're 247 years in as a country. We're still a young democracy. We're still a young country. But, based on the things that we've been through, that we've been involved in, the way we champion the ideals of freedom all around the world, we should be a lot farther here in our own backyard. In our own backyard. And so we know that, our colleagues on the right, for whatever reason, took this dark turn that led us into social unrest, disrespect around the world, and not more respect. Led us down a path of government that we've never seen before, as far as administration officials being fired versus one that are just filling the role as actors. We've never seen anything like this, so reckless in government. But what history teaches us and what we should learn is that, if we don't show up, then this is what can happen. This is what could happen. I mean, a former Democratic challenger for the Oval Office by the name of Hillary Rodham Clinton. She won the popular vote. We don't quite understand what happened with the Electoral College, but she won the popular vote. And with that being said, we're quite sure that she would have got over in the Electoral College also, had we had just a few more people not sit out. Now, it's all there for you to see with your own two eyes and for you to read in black and white, the difference in ideals of these two parties. The difference in ideas of these two parties. Now, as I said, with a turn rogue right, and slowly, but steadily, and that's the kind of the part there that should all make us do a double take. This thing from the time Trump came down the escalator to now has slowly, but at the same time steadily, eroded the core values of the party. It turned them into unethical politicians, politicians who were willing to look the other way at a time when leadership calls for them to speak out against a president who was a constitutional rogue right menace to the Oval Office and to the country. But they looked the other way. They resigned from office. They went along. They gave a wink and a nod. And so here we are. The former president lost his re-election bid. The candidates that he put forward for election into senator spaces, congressman spaces, lost. The candidates he endorsed, and so it turned itself on its ugly head because by looking the other way, by giving the wink and the nod, by going along instead of speaking out, we have, nothing to bargain with from the right. Not because we have launched an attack as Democrats against them so that they're unable to govern. It is fighting from within. It's fighting from within one's own Republican Party. And so we have to realize, the danger of it all. The danger of it all. Now, the number one solution is to vote. And, besides voting, still keeping that outstretched hand for democracy's sake, in debating, in talking over bills on the floor, hearing from both sides, willing to compromise. I mean, we as Democrats, we have to remain, and we are right now, the party that is America's last best hope. And, we can't trust Republican leadership to occupy the Oval Office when they can't get it together themselves from within as a party. And unlike, our Republican colleagues, we as Democrats, we can't throw anything at the wall just to see what it will stick in the form of false accusations, fear-mongering propaganda, to stir up the American voter with falsehoods, with misinformation. Now, since the Palestinians launched the attack on Israel, you have the Republicans coming out and saying that, well, it's because, as soon as the president released the money that they were holding from Iran, as soon as he unleashed these multiple billions of dollars, then the attack happened. And they used that money to finance, and nothing has been really verified, by the CIA, some of our leading intelligence gathering agencies. Nothing has been put out there that they're basing these statements off of. It's just false and misleading. And so, we have to take the high road here, as insulting as it may be, as much as one has a desire to come out and push back against the false narrative and the lies. We have to take the high road. The American people are not simple-minded to the fact that they can't realize themselves, where are these intelligence sources coming from? That tells us as the American people that this was an attack that was financially sponsored by Iran as soon as the multiple billions of dollars were freed up by the Biden administration. So, that's not governing. That's not, moving a country or a world forward. We can only solve and fix the problems that exist by looking at it for what it is. And so, it's not something that is of Soluble's own imagination. Or we here at Soluble are just making up things. Our attempt is to break it down to the American people as best we can, as we see it. And let you make a determination as to what do you think is best for the country, first of all, and then for us as the American people going forward. Nothing, is more fair. From a point of view of trying to solve once and for all. I mean, it hasn't changed. I mean, it's like, our colleagues across the aisle on the right, they just can't help themselves. When, you love your country and you're trying to, hot water, watch out. There's a pink glass on the table. When one loves their country and they're governing with the premise and responsibility of leading citizens and a country forward. Why put out false information? What purpose does it serve? But this is the depths that the Republican Party will go to in order to gain votes. Nothing more, nothing less. Not to, fix the problem, so to speak. Not to, bring the truth to light and put it out there factual for all the American people to see. Remember what happened leading up to the Iraq War. And here we are now with the same, false accusations, misleading statements. Then to now, the Iraq War, there are mobile chemical labs floating around. Saddam is sitting on a mass arsenal of dangerous chemical gases. And none of this comes to light. So how much, are we, the American people, supposed to take before we wisen up? It would help the Republican Party and it would help America, to show a blue wave on election day so that they will wisen up and realize that they have to get down to the nitty gritty business of governing. And not saying or doing anything to win elections. We're bigger than elections. Elections choose our leaders only. But at the end of the day, a functioning democracy takes, a think tank of leaders, if you will, in a lot of different areas in order to move the country forward. And so, you see it right here before your very eyes. Inner party squabbling. You can't choose a speaker. And without a speaker of the House, business as usual can't be done. Business as usual can't be done. So, I say here again now to the Democratic Party, we have a country to save. We have a country to save. And if we don't show up, if we don't vote, if we don't get involved, speaking truth to power on every issue, then we have a country to lose. And, only God knows what that will look like if democracy here in America, with all its existing freedoms, checks and balances, laws and governing, is lost. Who knows what that will look like? But we know it won't be, the peaceful times, the economic times, the jobs that we have, the livelihoods that we enjoy today. It will be forever changed. We know that. We don't know to, what extent, how low we can go, but we know that it could possibly forever change if we don't show up. Now, there are going to be a lot of things coming from the right, from talking heads in the media. Artificial intelligence is out here now in order to trip you up, in order to confuse you, so you're not sure what to think about each and or every candidate. So we have to be careful there because nothing has changed and it's in the playbook. You can go. The Republicans are going to pull out all the stops to mislead, to scare the American public. And this is their classic approach leading up to an election. Now, the border is all the rage. We do have trouble at the southern border. You see the president now, flying Venezuelans back to their home country. You see the president now sending officials to discuss with Mexican authorities as far as not letting, people like from Guatemala, for instance, or some of the countries below Mexico's southern border just enter freely into the United States. So the president is working. He's taking the money that's been appropriated, even though he tried to reappropriate it, And he said it honestly. He said it outright. Nothing misleading, nothing deception. He said it outright. I tried to reappropriate. He has a strong stance on walls. They don't work. But in order to go along with the law, and this does not reflect anything of a two-tier system, but going along with the law after trying to reappropriate the funds and admitting so that he did, the president put the funds toward what they were appropriated for. And that was to build more Southern Wall. Meanwhile, on the other hand, leading up to elections, leading up to, say, for instance, the 2020 midterm, the wall was all the rage. We don't have a border anymore. Taking migrants, immigrants, refugees, if you will, and busing them and flying them into northern cities, in the so-called liberal democratic cities or sanctuary cities. This is not the answer. This is not the answer. Right now, the Republicans are in control with a slim majority in the House, and there's nothing being brought to the floor to debate the southern border. There's no bill, no legislation being brought to the floor to hold the floor vote when it comes to the southern border. And, Democrats, we have to push as voters. We have to push our candidates that we send up, that win office seats up. We have to push them to champion comprehensive immigration reform. Now, we don't think that it's just so simple as this, but our position here is soluble is, to our colleagues on the right and to our fellow Democrats also, what is the number that we want to let in? We know that, some of these people are taking advantage of our refugee system and, our system of asylum seeking, to claim that they're under threat or that their life's in danger. We know this. It speaks to the greatness of America as far as, what some of these people, the lengths they will go and the things that they will say to try to gain citizenship. We get it. But a broken house, a divided house, a fractured house right now that can't even govern itself with the majority. And so, we know the definition of stupid. And we see this over and over and over and over again. We challenge right now, any Republican voter, any independent, it doesn't even have to be of a political affiliation. But especially to the Republican voter. We challenge you now to give us one good reason why we should, elect more Republican officials down the road. What are they doing now? What have they done in the past? That's good for America, long term. Not, not just when they're in office, but shortly after or long after they've left. How does it still affect the lives of American people? Now, we know that the divide between the middle class and millionaires and billionaires, that gap was pushed even further apart during, Bush 2's years, during President George W. Bush years. This gap was pushed further apart. And what have Republicans done to pull it back together? Where have we seen the examples of compassionate conservatism or trickle-down economics work? Since the speakership turmoil, I've seen several Republicans come on the record and speak so passionately about how we take in $5 trillion and we spend $7 trillion. But the former president comes into office, and before he could even get the seat warm, he's signing tax cuts into law, adding on to the deficit immediately in less than 24 hours. In less than 24 hours after taking office, the former president sits down and signs tax legislation that immediately adds to the deficit. And, the fiscal conservatives were quite as the church mouse as far as what it did, adding whatever to the deficit, unneedlessly. This was like, oh, this tax cut is so necessary, but yet it happened, and you do the math, you do the evaluation here. You, the American people, the American voter, who is going to be affected one way or another. No matter whether it's a Republican in office or a Democrat in office, we have things that are affecting us. First and foremost, in the name of climate change, it has an effect on the economy. Job, the cost of goods and services. It has an effect. Right now, where the mouth of the Mississippi meets the Gulf Coast, the Gulf Stream, if you will, salt water is infiltrating. It's infiltrating upstream because of the low water levels of the Mississippi River. And so what does the president do? He does the best he can by trying to get barge fresh water in, or get fresh water in there some kind of way to stem the tide. But what are we prepared as American citizens to say that it's the president's fault that the Mississippi River water levels are falling so drastically low? We know, the positions of each party on climate change. The Democrats, they're taking it serious. And it's not to say that the Republicans are not, but where's the sense of urgency here? So, to tell the whole story when it comes to prices for goods and services at the grocery store, at the hardware store, or wherever have you, a lot of it is being determined by climate change, which is to say neither Democrat or Republican administration's fault. But, we can roll up our sleeves and begin to work across the aisle to get these things solved. And so, with the current state of being, that we as Democrats and whatever common sense independents are out there, what we see as the current state of being, we know that we have to vote in that blue wave majority come 2024. We have no other alternative, because this is going to be the first and foremost way that the Republican Party gets its act together. And, it says a lot about a party that can only get its act together governing from a position of a minority. Now, as I said, you don't see the president come out and rest on his laurels about the latest job numbers. You don't see the president come out and rest his laurels when it comes to climate change, when it comes to foreign policy. With this Democratic president that we have, everything is constantly a work in progress. And rightfully so. And rightfully so. It's the way it should be. It's always a work in progress. And so we're trying to, as best we can here at Soluble, put American politics out there for all the public to see, so that we can come to an equal playing field, reaching a level of compromise. And we can only do it by speaking truth to power. Now, when we look to our colleagues on the right, and we're waiting for them to get their act together, the clock is ticking. As I said, it doesn't stop. Right now, the House is in disarray, and the Middle East is on fire. Imagine that. And here we are as a country that a large part of the world looks towards to say, let's see what America's going to do. Let's see how the steps that America's going to take to try and solve this problem. first and foremost. And here, you know, all we have to show is a house in disarray. And so, going forward as responsible voters, especially Democrats and those independents, we would not be, fulfilling our civic, patriotic, however you want to look at it. We would not be fulfilling our duty, responsibility, if we don't show up, if we don't get involved. And all the notions have been dispelled as far as, why vote. They're going to do what they want to do anyway. We saw it on January the 6th, an attempt to do what they wanted to do. So that notion has been dispelled. You have a president in office now, legitimately elected, and he's trying to solve everyday issues based on what he ran on. He's trying his best to make things better for the lives of everyday Americans, starting with the middle class and working his way out. What more could you ask for? He's honest. He's straightforward. He's straight shooting. This is not a president who is, saying one thing behind closed doors with cabinet level officials or with foreign leaders, and then coming out to the podium, waving and smiling to the American people and saying something totally different. There's a record here that has to be set straight. There's a constitution that has to be defended. And this particular point in time in America, 247 years in. And we see, as we've spoken here before, we see what one bad apple can do when you don't get it away from the bunch. This political infighting that we see going on in the House leads straight from Washington, D.C. to the doorsteps of Mar-a-Lago. Let me say it again. This political infighting that we see today in the House leads from Washington, D.C. straight to the doorsteps of Mar-a-Lago. Therein lies a dysfunction. And since the year 2015, when the president announced that he was a candidate, till now, he was elected, he was rejected. He was elected on, all things unpresidential, mocking world leaders, not standing up to Russia, not speaking highly of those patriots who have served, who have fought, who have died. From 2015 until now, where you see this political infighting with the slim majority that the Republicans have. It's reflective of the former president. What would be happening, only God knows, in the Senate, or if this was still going on in the Oval Office. Former Chief of Staff John Kelly has come forward, verifying stories, reaffirming stories about how the former president feels about the troops, and he sums it up with a God help us. So, to my fellow Democrats, we have a majority that we can hold. I mean, we have, hundreds of thousands of new voters who are going to be coming on the rolls come 2024 who weren't of age, just 4 years ago. We have to, and not saying that they can't themselves, but we have to, be able to show them sound policy, vocalize and articulate where we stand as Democrats. for the truth as it relates to the Constitution. And we have to get out there and be vocal with our message in defense, of America, the country we live in. The others have come before us and fought and died for in defense of liberty. It's in our hands. And if it falters, if democracy ceases to exist in America, to my fellow Democrats, we have no one to blame but ourselves. No one to blame but ourselves. So, in defense of the Constitution, in defense of democracy, we don't have to be bashful or timid or reluctant. We have to come out and stand firm. We have to come out and stand firm because, we know that that's what those who have come before us would want us to do. It's in our hands. And so, we have no other choice but to stand firm. Because with the Republican Party having gone so far rogue right, it's forced us into this position where, as Democrats, we've taken it. We've looked the other way. We gave that slap on the wrist with a statement of knock it off. We've waited and hoped that, common sense would prevail amongst, our colleagues on the right. And none of it is true. None of it is true. And so, we can only be pushed so far off of, the center basis of what the Constitution stands for, what our system of laws and checks and balances stand for. We can only be pushed off of that center so far before we must take a firm hold and begin to hold ground and push back. And this is that time, now more than ever. This is that time now more than ever. I mean, we can't have our leaders come into office and be fearful of enacting legislation because, they're thinking about what will happen if Republicans win the next time around. We have to be bold and make, bold choices, bold statements in defense of America, and in defense of the democracy. I mean, the former president comes into office and boldly, with no hesitation, as I said, sign tax cuts into law. And we don't need a tit for a tat situation to be like a back and forth because we know two wrongs don't make a right. But we should expect our Democrat leaders to come into office on day one and just as boldly sign things into legislation also. But our Democratic leaders have that fear. They have that thought in the back of their minds where, the next time around, if the Republicans win, what's going to happen? That's not the approach we should take. Because that approach is the same approach that's got us where we are now, with democracy teeter-tottering on the brink. What can we get started on? Here he is with Congress broken. Because the two, the House and the Senate, works together in tandem. So if one is broken, it's all broken. If one part of it is broken, then it's all broken. And so here we sit, waiting for a speaker, to be elected. Who has the votes? Is this going to be Scalise? Or is it going to be Jim Jordan? Who? When? And as I said, meanwhile, the world doesn't stop. The world doesn't stop. But up to this point in time, and it's going to be, really shameful if it's beginning to fade. But up until this point in time, the world has paused to see, what course of action America is going to take. And here we are. We can't even get it together. In order to govern, in order to put out a statement. You see the president put out a statement, but it's just that. Oftentimes, a presidential statement is nothing unless he has a Congress to react. So At the end of the day, it's all about solving, the state of politics that we're in. And Democrats, we're going to have to push back on misinformation more than ever because we see that our colleagues on the right, they love it. They love it in order to discourage voters, in order to trick voters. And they mix in just enough racism in order to gather that audience, if you will. And that audience seems to fail to realize that after election day and Republicans are in office, what are they getting? They're getting little to nothing. They're getting little to nothing. We're going to, in taking issue by issue, we're going to start off with the two-party system, two ideals on how America should best be governed, and look at, how both parties feel about the economy and jobs. Breaking it down from a Republican point of view and breaking it down from a Democratic point of view, and hoping that some of the things that we say and are discussed here on the podcast can be eye-opening and bring a more state of awareness to you as the American voter. Because at the end of the day, as cliche as it sounds, it is in the hands of we the people. It is in our hands. Now, you see the former president try to take it out of our hands with the January 6th attack on a free and fair election. But democracy held. And as long as we come out in numbers on what we think is best, to govern ourselves as a country, it could be Democratic ideas, it could be Republican ideals, and we've stated that many times here on Soluble, because we don't expect that we're going to solve this, without working with our colleagues on the right. We don't expect that, nor do we hope that. We're hoping that we can revive a two-party system that works together. That's our sole purpose in trying to solve. But for right now, it is what it is. It is what it is. And so, as Democrats, we're forced to push on, doing the right thing for America and the American people. And, continuing to be patient and wait and hope that our colleagues on the right will come back to a more common sense form of government. A more common sense form of government from a nation of immigrants who has always extended an olive branch or outstretched arm or hand to the oppressed around the world. Around the world. Now, we're stuck. Basically, we're stuck because we don't see anything coming. The notion that it was a two-tier system has been dispelled with the indictment of Senator Menendez for bribery. And the evidence is all, just like the former president, the evidence has been laid out for all to see. Just like, our institutions have been doing for years and years and years. Here you have Senator Menendez brought up on bribery charges. Evidence against him laid out, gold bars, wads of cash in envelopes in his closet, and various items of clothing, luxury cars. So, the notion of a two-tier system has been dispelled. And we don't, expect to govern, or, it's not like we're salivating here at Soluble or enjoying the moment to say, okay, what's next? But that's all we have. What's next? Are we gonna govern the American people by, making it our job to constantly dispel false notions? A two-tier system that should be gone. That should be never heard of again, unless we had a senator, brought up on bribery charges, and all of a sudden the case was thrown out or the charges were dropped. That's not the case here. So that's over. What's next? Can we get to the business of governing? The impeachment inquiry is going nowhere. It's not there. The witnesses have been brought forward. The witnesses have been brought forward to vouch for or verify, if you will, what Republican politicians have been saying. And what these same witnesses have said who have been brought forward is, we're not there yet. And I guess we can only, as Democrats, take that to mean they're still looking. They're still searching. Meanwhile, we do need to be, bringing common sense legislation to the floor for the good of America and possibly the world. But we're not there yet on impeachment inquiry. And, with that being said, we have to appeal to, our Republican voters of America. Is this what, you sent your leaders up to Washington, D.C. to do? And if not, when these politicians go home to their districts, as their constituents, you owe it to America and to the Constitution also, even though you are right-wing voters. The country is bigger than party. So you owe it to these, political leaders to tell them to get their act together and not just accept anything. But this is what you put forward in pushing for a House majority controlled by Republicans. Failed investigations, no legislation. Now, you would think that with failed investigations, they would get on with the business of governing the people. But instead of standing down, it's a double down. It's a double down. And who pays the price? We, the American people. And the rest of the world is watching. Not, watching to wait and see if we crumble. Not watching to wait and see, what they can mock us on in order to post on social media. But they're watching because they're so used to America taking the leading role. And now we seem to be, fumbling at the wheel, fumbling at the controls. And, we cannot continue to do that. And at the same time, maintain respect around the world for being a sound democracy with free and fair elections that all the people have a say in. And so, we're still in this happy low place. We're happy that democracy is held. We have a new president, and democracy lives. Democracy wins, but the threat still looms. The threat still looms, and so we must do as our predecessors. They had to press on in troubling times, in challenging times to the Republic. Revolutionary War, French and Indian War, the war against the crown, the Spanish-American War. America has come through a lot, as we've said, in its short 247 years of existence. And we can make this, we have the power right now. And once again, to that 90-something plus percentile of Negro voters in the Republican Party. We have the power right now to save America. To save it from, a time where we get caught up in what we think is fake news and it's actually real news. To save us from a time of going back into civil unrest, to a time of all races in this melting pot progressing together, towards a future that's inclusive versus exclusive. And we see the damages of that. And so as Democrats, it's time to stand up now and grow a backbone more than ever, because it's in your hands. It's in your hands. As Democrats, we have put forward the best man for the job in occupying the Oval Office as President of the United States. We have put forward the best man possible for the job. Now, he just happened to be a Negro, was elected to office, served 2 full terms, served faithfully, served dutifully, brought the economy back from the brink, tried to save the nation from itself, with soaring healthcare costs. Well, that would have sooner or later bankrupted the country. Bringing forth, the Affordable Care Act. Governing from a position of, championing the middle class out and the economy work. Eliminating Osama bin Laden, which was public enemy number one, for America, based on what happened on September 11, 2001. All these things, the best person for the job that we put forward, who just happened to be a Negro, serving as President of the United States. Now, on the flip side, the successor that the Republican Party put forward was the most vile, the most racist, the most misogynistic, the least empathetic man for the job. It was beyond all of our wildest imagination as to why they would sink so low, but nevertheless they did. And so you see the stark differences here. A tale of two presidents. One put forward by a party, looking at it from a point of view as the best man for the job, who just happened to be a Negro. The next put forward by a party who, just happened to be the most vile, the most racist, the most misogynistic, the most unqualified. But yet they still put him forward as best for America. Now, people make mistakes. But because our colleagues on the right were so Johnny-come-lately and acknowledging the mistake, that the former president is still controlling the party. He owns the party. And so here we are at a point in time at 247 years in, where we're thankful that we have a common sense president who is, president of the whole United States. And we're not being led by, some authoritarian, egotistical maniac who is controlling a party that is steady, sliding further and further into the abyss when it comes to governing, ethics and governing, leadership, non-corruption. One of the latest things that we're hearing now is, not only has the president played fast and loose with classified documents in the past, but now, some of the latest reporting that's coming out is that, he may have been revealing, secrets, from some of our most sophisticated equipment in the form of nuclear subs. What kind of president does that? This is so unpresidential. To be at this, the highest level of government, and you're, just so nonchalant and careless, with some of America's top secret information. Knowing that there are a lot of rogue nations out there that want to be just like us. I was working on a military base here, a couple years back, submarine base up in Georgia, Kings Bay, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm just casually up there working on base, doing some painting work, and I'm not really thinking nothing of it. I'm really not. I'm just a curious painter. I see a GI, coming out of his unit that I'm painting in. And so, I strike up a little brief conversation. And during the course of that brief conversation, I ask him, what's the farthest you've ever been down? And he tells me, like the patriotic, servant of the Navy that he is, I can't tell you that. That's classified. So, here we are at this point in time in history where you have the average everyday GI, very low ranking in grade and pay as it relates to the commander in chief. And here you have this GI protecting America's secrets, which is what he's sworn to do. So, this just speaks to the level of apathy, disregard for the office, for the protecting the nation's secrets, thereby protecting the nation's interests. And, you see it for yourself. You see it for yourself. And in closing, I'll say this. This is why it's good that we live in a country with a system set up the way it is, so that no one person, male or female, can, just solely overturn this system that the framers and founders set up. The checks and balances are so steady that, it may weeble or wobble, but if we the people, take that active approach, that active step in being a participating partner in democracy and governing, when we have bad leaders, we vote them out. When we have good leaders, we vote to keep them in for a second term. And that's the power and beauty of the system that we're in. Now, we see the perception, Democrats, the president is too old for the job. And, we should also see that it doesn't meet the reality. There are two different things here. You don't have a president, who is too old for the job, going and volunteering to walk a picket line. Who does that? That's too old and too feeble and so tired he's spending all his time in the basement. And, as old as the president is, you haven't heard one thing yet that has come out in his first term in office to say that, so-and-so is President Biden's brain. In his late 70s, he's still his own man. Sound in thinking, decision maker. Of course, he's listening to his advisors. But as I said, the perception does not in no way meet the reality. And so as Democrats, we have to defend what's ours, defend the candidate that we put forward until we as a party, without interference from outside the party, until we as a party make a determination that, we need to move on to another leader. Let's not get distracted by the outside noise or discouraged or, attempt to have your minds changed, or, attempt to have you second guessing your choices. It's all here for you to see. The jobs report is out. You see what's going on with foreign policy. You see the stance that the president is taking on climate change. It was one time said that manufacturing in America was dead. But we see its revival. Under what? Which president? Which leader? President Joseph R. Biden. Manufacturing is alive and well in America. Whether it be in, making batteries for EV vehicles, whether it's something that has to do with the infrastructure, Inflation Reduction Act, it's alive and well and thriving. Manufacturing jobs right here in the homeland, not made in China, but right here in America. So, as I said, it's there for you to hear. It's there for you to see. And so, our position here at Soluble is that, no one politician should make up the minds of we, the American people, when it comes to choosing our leaders. What you see is what you get. And the American people saw it in 2015, leading up to 2016. They voted it in. And so here we are. Families are being split up. People are going to prison. People are being indicted. People are turning state's evidence. People are copping pleas. And you've never seen this from any previous administration. Who have you seen from the Obama administration, where there's such a high number of people in trouble with the laws? So as I said, this is like, when the president ascended to the Oval Office, this was the equivalent of Scar, introducing the lions at Pride Rock to confederation with the hyenas. And we know what happened then. Everything began to die down because the balance was off. And so that's what we had here with the former president. Everything began to die off. Like I say, people going to prison, families being broken up. In the words of his former Attorney General Bill Barr, carnage, he's just leaving carnage in his wake. But what more should we expect based on, the statements that the president made when he came out in 2015, based on what he showed us? So we're hoping that, the Republicans can get it together, elect a speaker, elect another speaker, a new speaker, and, we can get on with the business of the American people and, for the sake of the world, trying to bring peace to the Middle East, a solution to a conflict that's raged on and on and on for years, administration after administration. So we need, our colleagues on the right to seriously get it together. Because, without them, in the majority that they have right now, Congress is broken. Simply because of infighting. And, it's totally contradictory to what, leaders should be doing. And what they've been sent to Washington, D.C. to do. This is not the answer. And so, join us on our next episode, like I said, when we will begin to discuss issue by issue, starting off with the economy and jobs. That's going to be our first discussion based on a two-party system with two separate ideals on the economy and jobs. And that will be our first, line of discussion leading up to the 2024 elections, as we, the American people, get ready to decide, the future direction of leadership for the country. That's all we have for you tonight here at Soluble. We thank you for joining us. We welcome any feedback, any opinions while we're on the air. We welcome our listeners to chime in because, two heads group discussion is always better than just one single opinion. And that's what it's going to take to, get the country back on track, get our politicians to working across the aisles again, which is the main goal here at Soluble, for compromise in solving the problems that affect us as everyday Americans, and that's affecting the country, and that spill over into the entire world. So we thank you for joining us tonight here at Soluble. Until the next time, we're signing off. This is Soluble saying good night and God bless. Thank you.